Hi guys, welcome back to Java Full Stack Made Easy session 66. Here we will be talking about the Angular HTTP. Previous session, if you remember, we spoke about the REST API, what exactly REST API is, and how REST API acts as an intermediator between your front end and the back end. Then, since we didn't had any REST API created, so we mimicked a REST API, we faked a just REST API by using the JSON server, and also we have tested that by using Postman in our previous session, that was session 65. If you have not watched that session, please go ahead and watch that session. So now what I'm gonna do is, since we have already created this project in our previous example itself, and here we have also created a db.json. So first of all, before diving into the next topic, that is going to be Angular HTTP, where I'm gonna consume the REST API from the Angular side, so let us first bring in our REST API into picture. Since we have closed this previous session, so whatever we have done in the previous session, that means if the JSON server and everything is closed, then you have to restart it. So in my machine, since I've already closed the JSON server, so I have to restart the JSON server. So I went into the HTTP demos project, which I created in previous session, and then I'm gonna open a terminal here into this HTTP demos. Okay, so I'll just type in cmd here, so a command will be opened on that path itself. So if you remember, in the previous session itself, I told you the command to start a JSON server is JSON hyphen server hyphen hyphen watch db.json. So you should ensure that your JSON server is up and running before you write anything in Angular. That means if you want to consume a REST API, it should be ready, right? So if your REST API is not up and running, then there is no point of consuming it. So this was the dummy data that I have in my REST API as of now. That is, there are two cars available, car 2 and car 3. Car 1 I deleted. If you remember, in my Postman, I have deleted one car in my previous example itself. So let us once again just test the REST API before we start consuming the REST API. So my REST API is up and running on my Postman. I can see there are two car records that are retrieved, so I can retrieve these records. That actually means that the REST API is ready. Now let us go ahead and try coding in Angular. How am I going to consume this REST API at the Angular side? So very first thing is that I need a model that maps to the properties that are there in my REST API. So I'll go to the source here, and I'll create a model. So the model name, I'll give it as car dot model dot TypeScript. Fine. So I'll be creating a model class here. So we know that how to create a model class. So it is just a simple export class, the class name. So in this case, the class name, I'm gonna give it as car, and then the properties. So I want the same properties that are there in here. So I'll just copy up all these properties and create similar properties for the car. So what I want is, I want an ID to be created, and the ID as of now is an empty ID. Similarly, I want a name, and that name again is an empty variable that I'm creating. Okay, then we want maker, this property. So maker initially, again, that will also be empty. And lastly, the color. So create your model first, and then we can map that to the available data. Fine. So looks good, right? Instead of comma, it should be semicolon. That's fine. So our model class is ready with just some properties declared in that. Now the next thing is that whenever we want to work with the Angular HTTP, we have to include that into our application. So let us go to the app.module.typescript. So in the app module.typescript, I will be including few of the modules which will be helpful in the HTTP consuming. So first of all, I'm going to go for the forms module because I know that in future I'm going to implement two-way data binding. So let us include that. Then the HTTP client module. Okay. So we need that HTTP client module. Let's include that as well. Now HTTP client module needs to be imported, and HTTP client module comes up from Angular Commons HTTP. Let's include that here. HTTP client module from Angular slash common slash HTTP. So from here I'm going to include a HTTP client module which says that it is deprecated anyways, no problem. Fine. So I got the HTTP client module now. Now the next point is that we have included the HTTP client module. Then to consume this, we need the HTTP service, and also the cars data is something that I'm importing. So I need a car service as well. So I'm gonna open a terminal, which obviously will go always go for what command prompt. So I will do a ng generate service. The car service is something that I want to generate, and within the car service I'm going to consume the HTTP, the built-in service, and from there itself I'm gonna work with the car details. So let's include this car service. Let's call it as, yeah, car service. So once this service is generated, let's get into the car service. Now inside this car service we would need a HTTP client service. So let's go for the constructor and inject the HTTP client service here. So private HTTP client. Fine. So I have included that, and then we need to import that as well. So HTTP client is imported. Now since the HTTP client is imported, now the REST API, we already know that the REST API is up and running. So we should be consuming that REST API. So for that I'll just use a get cars as a function which will retrieve all the cars that are available on this REST API, that is HTTP localhost 3000 cars. Fine. So here I will be consuming it by using this dot HTTP dot a get method of HTTP. Now this get method takes the URL from where it has to consume the data. So I am providing the URL from where the data has to be consumed, and that is the same thing I'm returning here. So this returns a promise which has to be subscribed. Fine. So now that we are done with setting up our service, so let's go to the component where we can display the data of this service, right? So I'll go to the app component as of now. So let's go to the app component.typescript, and this is the default stuff which is there in the app component TypeScript. I'll just clean up everything that's there. And the second thing is HTML also. I'll just clean it up. Let's save the TypeScript and HTML together. And now we have to consume the service that we have created, the car service that we have created. So we know that to consume that car service, we are gonna again inject the car service by calling the service inside the constructor. So constructor, again private car service of type car service. Fine. So we have now injected that, and once we have injected, we want the get cars to consume the service. So here also we will have a method called as get cars, where we will be consuming the method get cars from the car service. So it will be car service dot get cars dot subscribe. So we have to subscribe to this function because it is a promise there, so we have to subscribe to it, and subscribe method takes two callback functions as its argument, which we have already discussed before. One is the data, another one is the error. So in case of data, what should happen, and in case of error, what should happen? In case of error, I'll just say alert. Whatever is the error, just alert me that error. Or we can simply go for a console log for a better understanding, console.log, so that we can see the error on the console. If there is data, that means if the data is returned by this car, so that data is nothing but this car's array, right? So what I will do is I'll create an array here, a cars array of type car, which should be empty as for now. Fine. So that same array should be mapped with the data that is subscribed from that service, right? So here I'm just gonna write it as this dot cars will be equal to the data. So whatever data is returned, that should be stored into the cars. Okay, so let's go to the service now, car service, and while retrieving this data, I'll say this is gonna return me an observable of type car array, so that this error that we were facing here, that the data cannot be parsed to the cars. So now what I have simply done is that in the get method, I'm saying that whatever data we are retrieving, that data is of type cars array. So we should be knowing the data, what data we are consuming from the API, and that is the same data I'm mapping here. Fine. So let us now, after getting this data, let us just do a console.log and see whether we are getting the data or not. So console.log, I'll just print the cars, that shows me whether I retrieve the cars from the service or not. Fine. So once that is done, we have to call this get cars method, right? So let us call this get cars method the moment this component is loaded. And we have already we already know ng on init is a method that gives us that. So let us just implement the on init. So it will be implements on init, and that method will actually be implemented, right? So it is going to be our ng on init. So here I am calling the get cars method. That means the moment the component is loaded, the get cars method has to be called. When the get cars method is called, it has to subscribe to the car service. The car service actually calls up the API, REST API. Fine. So this is how things work. Let's test it. Now I'm gonna simply do a ng ser -o, that opens up into the browser. Fine. So it should, what I'm expecting here is the API is up and running. So I'm expecting the data to be displayed to me. So let's go to the console by inspecting this. And on console, I was expecting this array. So that's what I have got. So you can see that there are two cars that are retrieved to me. So I don't want to display it on the console. I want to display it on my HTML. So let's go ahead and display it on the HTML page. So it is simple. We know that we have already spoken about this data binding in our previous sessions itself, where we can bind the data. So here I want to bind this array to one of the table, and to do that, we know that we can make use of the ng for directive. So let's go to the app.html, and here on the app.html, let us create a table for cars, right? So I'm gonna format this table a bit to look for this to look better. I'm not binding it with any variable, so that's why no square bracket. So let the width of this should be 80% of the page size, and also let's give the border to this table, let's give it as 2 pixels. Fine. So the table is ready, and we know that there are 4 properties that needs to be displayed: ID, name, maker, and the color. So I'm gonna create the TDs for that, or the table heads for the same. The table head is gonna be ID, that should be in the first row. Fine. So it needs ID, maker, name, and color, right? So ID, name, maker, color. So these properties are nothing but the properties that I'm getting from the API. So I'm giving the heading for that, And now the next thing is that in the next row should be generated as long as there is data in the array. So the next table row will have the ng for. So as long as the data is there, keep retrieving the data. So let car of cars. Fine. So now this will be car dot id, car dot name, car dot maker. So these are the properties that I have already declared in the model car dot color. Fine, so let's save it. So since we have already tested it on the console that we were getting the data, sorry, so it is printed as it is. That's because I did not do a interpolation here. So it should be the data that is coming up from that array. Okay, now it should display the data. So it was displaying the car color and everything as it is. So now I added it into the interpolation. So here you can see that there were two cars, and those two cars are shown to us. That way we can consume the REST API. What I will do is I'll go to Postman and add a new data into this REST API and test whether this new data will be added or not. So I'll go to the bodies. Yeah, ID3 is already there, Swift, Maruti, White. So which we already have, right? Ritz is there. So let's change the ID and get the car Swift Maruti of white color. So let's hit send. So we got that details. It is created. Let's just reload this. Okay. So there is some issue with this. Let's check it. Yeah. So three details are retrieved. Those three details has to be mapped. So let's check what is the issue now. Yeah, it's now updated. Should show me the detail. Yes. So now you can see that the moment the data is added, you can see Leva, Ritz and Swift, all the details are retrieved to me. This way we can consume the HTTP request in Angular. So if you want a REST API to be consumed, then remember these steps what I have implemented here. First of all, the REST API should be up and running. This REST API can either be created by using JSON server or by using Python or by using Java or anything, because here our primary goal is to consume the REST API, not to create the REST API. In the previous session itself, the REST API was created, and in this session we have just consumed the REST API. We just tested whether the REST API is working fine or not on Postman, and once that was done, once the things were confirmed that we have the REST API, so what we did in Angular was simple. First of all, we went into the app.module.typescript, and there we included the HTTP client module, and from HTTP commons Angular HTTP. And once that was included, we have already included a forms module. We know that if we want a two-way data binding, then the forms module will be necessary. After that, what we did was we created a model as per the data that we are getting from the API. So we were getting ID, name, maker and color. So that's what the properties we have created in our model. And then what we did was we created a service, ng generate service car service. So inside the service, what we have done is we actually injected the HTTP client, which is a built-in service again provided by Angular, that is used to consume a REST API. So we included that service, and from that HTTP client service we are calling the get method, which is used to retrieve, that is fetch the data from an API. And we are giving an observable of cars array stating that this particular URL is going to return me the data of type cars, right? So on HTTP localhost 3000/cars, this is the URL on which the API is ready, and that API is returning me the cars type of data, and you just return this data whoever calls the get cars method. So by doing that, we are done with the service. And then we went into the app.typescript, and we now injected the service that we have created, the cars service, and we know that it is going to return us the cars type of array. That's why we have initialized the car types of array to an empty array. And then on init, the moment the component is loaded, we are calling this.getCars. So the this.getCars is this local method which is being called, and this local method is actually subscribing to the service method, that is car service, and we are calling the getCars. So getCars.subscribe returns us two things. Either it can return us the data, that means if it is successful it returns us the data. If there is any problem, it returns us the array error. So when it is successful, what we are doing is whatever data is retrieved, the same data has to be stored into the array this dot cars that we have created above. So once that is done, what we have done is we took all the data that is from the cars array in the TypeScript page and just stored it into a car object, and we are displaying that. So that way you consume a REST API in Angular. So I'll just be sharing everything, all these details with you, and this will be our session 66. So let's create a repository for the same. Day 66 demo 1, get all from REST API. Fine. So first of all, what you should do is you should first ensure note REST API. That means your JSON server is up and running on port 3000. Fine. So if the port is different, then you have to give that port in your service. Fine. So once that is done, you do a ng generate service, the car service. Fine. So if you see that I've generated the I have created a car service first and then did a ng serve. So you can see that here ng generate service, the car service is something which I have created. And then this is my car service dot TypeScript, where I consume the HTTP client. And before this, I actually included the HTTP client module in app.module.typescript. And also for two-way data binding, in this project I have already included a forms module, because in future I know that I'm gonna make use of the forms module. Fine. So car service app.module.typescript, and then the model, I'll give you the model here above, car.model.typescript. So you have to create the model. We already know how to create the model. In our previous sessions we have already discussed how do we create models. So model is created, app module, the required dependencies are added, then the car service injecting the HTTP, and then the app.typescript, where we will be subscribing to the cars that are being generated, the get cars method that's being created in the service. Then the app.html. Fine. So this way we can consume the data from an API. The difference between consuming the data from an API and just a simple array is that in previous sessions I have already shown you how do we get the data from an array that was created into a service, right? So that difference would be the data was local. That means temporary in that examples. If you store the data and then you refresh, all the details that were stored in an array will be gone, right? But in this case it will not be. Even if you refresh it, the data will still be there, because the data is actually stored into the db.json. So until and unless you delete it by yourself, the data will not be deleted from the db.json. Fine. So now that we have stored the data, let us now learn the second part of this, that is going to be how are we going to post the data into Angular HTTP, and how do we deal with the request body. So let's learn about posting the data. So to post the data, obviously we need some form and everything. So before that, let us set up the service. So I want to post the data, that means I want to add the car. So what type of details needs to be added? I have to tell that I'm gonna add a car object which is of type car. That's what is taken in here, right? So if you see the postman, in a post detail, a car object is passed in here, and that should be added. So I'm saying that car type of data will be added into the REST API. Then once again, whoever consumed this, return that the same to them. So return the HTTP, that is this dot HTTP post method I'm consuming now. So the type of data I'm gonna give to this post method is of type car, and the URL on which this particular thing is working is same localhost 3000. Fine. So this is the data, and post method takes two arguments. One is the URL, the second one is the request body, right? So I'm saying that the request body is of type car, so whatever is passed with this method, whoever calls this particular method, they are going to give me this car model, car object, and that will be passed in here, and that will be stored to the API. So we are done setting up the service method for this, right? So let's go to the app.html and then allow the user to insert the details. Fine. So let's go to the app.html and let's allow the user to enter the details. So for that, we know that we have to create a object of type car and then take the values from the user and then send it to the service. So let us create for post, I'm writing everything in here. This is for add car. So for adding a car, I will first create the car object of type new car so that we get the properties. So here I go. Now what I'm gonna do is, once again here also I'll put a comment, add car is something I'll write. So in fact I have to create a separate component and then use a add car. So instead of creating components and everything, and I'm doing it here itself. So you can you can in fact create other components, call in the uh, create components on and create the routing as well, and then you can navigate from one page to another page and work on a full-fledged application. I'll show that example also later, but as of now my concern is about how do I add the data to a REST API. So let's create some inputs here. So input type is gonna be of type text, and what it is going to be, it is for car, right? So input type is going to be of type text, and then I'm going to perform an data binding which is for the car that I have already created. So it is going to be ng model will be equal to car dot id. Similarly, four things I'll create. A placeholder is also required, and this is going to be an id. Fine. So similarly, name of the car, maker of the car, and the color of the car, right? Name, maker, and color. So this will set up everything for us, and this will be bind to the car name, this will be bind to the maker, and this will be bind to the color. Fine. So everything looks good. Now let's create a button that adds up the car. Fine. So upon click of this button, an add car method has to be called. So I have not created the add car method yet, so let's go ahead and create the add car. So HTML is used to design the things. We have already designed it, right? So after designing it, let's go to the app.typescript. Let's write this method add cars. Upon click of this, add cars will be working, right? So in the add cars, we have to just subscribe to the method that we have created inside the service. Okay, so we already have the this dot car service here, then dot add cars. So we are going to subscribe to this particular method. Again, this subscribe takes two argument, that one is the data, another one is the error, right? So two callback functions it takes. So the first one is the data. Upon successful add car, I'm just gonna alert this and say car added, and if there is any error, then I'm just gonna console log that error to resolve it by looking at the error. Alright, so things look good, and this add car takes an argument which is nothing but the car that we have initialized in the HTML here. Fine. So that local car object I have to take. So let's just save everything, the service and everything, and let's test the application whether a new car gets added or not. So car ID 1 is something I want to add, and the name of the car I want to give what Fortuner, and the maker Toyota, the color be black. Then just click on add car, says car added, and that car will be now displayed on this ID. So obviously it is taking time to retrieve the data from that API to me, but you can see that it will be available on the console. Console has retrieved 4, so you can see that it has it already added the car ID 1, name, Fortuner, maker, all that is added. So let's just go ahead and save the application once again to get this. So I'll go here. Fine. So you can see that one Fortuner Toyota Black is retrieved. So if we create separate components, obviously at that time this problem should not occur. So it will upon ng on in it has to happen. Fine. So or else what we can also do here is, let us test that. If yeah, maybe that is because it is not reloaded in the memory, that's why it is showing like that. So if we create separate components, at that time it should not be a problem. But now that we have added the details to the uh, API by using a post method, and also we have retrieved the data from an API. So let's go ahead and let me share you how did I add that. So I went into the car service, I added this particular method, the add car. So I'll be giving you the service for this. Let's call it as demo2 add car. So in the car service dot typescript, this is the car service dot typescript, and then I came into the app dot typescript. So here is my app dot typescript where I am consuming the add car, where simply I created an object of the car, and then upon click of the button, I'm storing this particular car object, which is actually mapped to an HTML properties there. That car I'm subscribing, and if the car is added, I'm just gonna say car added, else the error. Then lastly, the HTML, the app.html. Let's go to the app.html, and in the app.html, we are just performing a two-way data binding for all these input fields, and upon click of the button, we are retrieving the detail. Fine. So what you can do is you can simply add the car, and you can come down and test that cars are added in here or not in the API. So you can see it here in the API also, the car is added here. Fine, one Fortuner Toyota Black, that is added, and you can also go to your db.json and check whether that car is added or not. So that car should be added here as well. Fine. So that way things work in the uh, REST API and Angular HTTP. So hopefully you have understood two concepts here, that is adding the data to an API and retrieving the data from an API in Angular. In my next session, I'll be talking about how do we retrieve a specific data, that is get by ID, how do we delete the data, and how do we update the data. So three more things are left with respect to Angular HTTP. So in the next session, we will be talking about that. So stay tuned for the next session. See you in the next session. If you're liking in the series, you do share the series with your friends. Let them also learn with you, and also that helps me gain more subscribers. And do subscribe to my channel. That motivates me to create more such content for you. Thank you. See you in the next video.